Welcome to today's Nedgroup Investments Multi-Manager webinar. It is our first webinar for 2026, and it is great to have everybody dialed in and ready for 4 amazing presentations. My name is Trevor Garvin, and I am Head of Nedgroup Investments Multi-Manager, and I will be your host today. We have 4 speakers lined up. Each speaker is going to be around about 20 minutes or so. So we are looking at a presentation in totality of around about an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and a half, which we hope will provide you with amazing and interesting insights. The 4 speakers are JP Landman, a political commentator, and he will be speaking about the up-and-coming municipal elections and giving us his comments about how that could unravel and the coalition opportunities. After that, we have Nicole Madule from Coronation Fund Managers. She will be speaking about artificial intelligence in terms of how it fits into Coronation's house view and their global equity portfolios. Following from Nicole, we have Herman Smit. He is Nedbank's Chief Behavioral Economist, and he will be giving us comments and insights following the AI theme in terms of cognitive behavior. And finally, we will end off with Rashad Tayob from Ford Asset Management. He is a specialist in fixed income, and he will be speaking about the effects of the rising energy prices, and we've seen the petrol prices in South Africa rise a lot over the course of the last month, and what effects that will have on inflation in the country, as well as the outlook for inflation rates. And we have the MPC meeting on this, and they will be deciding in terms of the outlook for interest rates. So a great lineup of speakers that we look forward to today. So first up, we have JP Landman, political commentator, and he will be speaking about the up-and-coming municipal elections. So JP, thanks so much for joining us today. Great to have you, and we really look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you, Trevor, and good day to everybody. Well, with the local government elections about 5.5 months away, and with reports almost daily from all over the country about how local governments are failing, that is the pertinent topic to discuss. Now, there are a couple of interesting points to remember about local government, and the first one is that local government occupies a very particular constitutional position. They are regarded as a government in its own right. They get elected on a separate voters' roll. They can make laws or regulations in respect of their territory. They pass their own budgets and they appoint their own people. Now, the relevance of that is that one cannot sit in the union buildings and give an instruction to a municipality that they will do this or that or the other. And likewise, one cannot sit in the union building or any provincial capital, be it Cape Town or wherever, Durban, and say, we will appoint so and so to a position in the local government. It doesn't work like that. So whatever changes you want to make have to take place inside this constitutional and institutional constraint that we have. But in spite of that, it has now become clear to everybody in South Africa that local government is the Achilles heel of this country. We've got problems in many places, but the worst probably congregate in the sphere of local government. And that is because it's a threat to fiscal stability. It's no good getting ratings upgrade like we got last week. And then in the meantime, municipal finances are deteriorating at an alarming rate. It undermines the national fiscal stability. And secondly, of course, local government is where the tire hits the tar. That is where businesses operate. That is where consumers live. That is where households spend their money and live their lives. And if things don't work there, then you cannot have growth at the national level. So those 2 items, fiscal stability and growth, are the reasons why we have to take local government seriously and do something about it. Now, on the fiscal point, just look at the numbers that I've got on the screen for you. At the moment, well, that was at the end of December, local governments in South Africa owed 161 billion rand, largely to water authorities and to Eskom and to SARS. Most of that debt was older than 3 months. Now, on the other side of the coin, the residents of municipalities, the consumers of power and electricity and so on, owe municipalities 467 billion. So you can see that if everybody pays their due, then the 161 billion will disappear. Now, the interesting thing about that 467 is that about 3/4 of it is owed by households, residences, but about 100 billion is owed by business, which shows you that it's not just households that's trying to free ride, but business as well. And about 24 billion or so are national and provincial government departments that fail to pay municipalities. And the bottom line of all these numbers is simply that basic services are severely disrupted. Maintenance is not being done on water and electricity. CapEx is not being spent. The appropriate people are not employed. Basic services pay the price. And that undermines growth and, as I've said, fiscal stability. And therefore, it should be no surprise that the reform of local government has been elevated to a high national priority. In fact, it is now one of the 6 top priorities of Operation Vulindlela. And Vulindlela, as you know, is the joint effort by the Presidency and National Treasury to drive structural reform in our country and in our economy. Now, this structural reform pressure is coming from 4 different sectors or 4 different departments. The first one is National Treasury, which is withholding the payment of what is called the equitable share to local governments. Equitable share is simply the portion of the national tax income that accrues to local governments. It is collected by SARS, it is controlled by the Treasury, but it's paid over to local governments. Now, what Treasury has started doing in the last year or 2 is to say to local governments, if you owe money, we're not going to give you your portion of the equitable share. You first have to settle your debts. And there you can see the numbers. In 24-25, 34 municipalities were hit with a big stick in that way. And by December 2025, 75 municipalities, or 29% of all the municipalities in the country, were hit by that big stick. But Treasury, on the other hand, is also helping municipalities. They, as I've already said, there are provincial and national departments who owe money to local governments. They use water, they use electricity, they have to pay rates and taxes, but they don't. And what Treasury has started doing this year is to withhold money, and you can see the amounts there. It adds up to about 24 billion from those departments that do not honor their obligations to local government. So Treasury is putting the squeeze with cash flow management by withholding transfers, and that should in due course discipline everybody to do their bit. The second department that is putting pressure up is Eskom. Not so much a department as a national utility, but essentially Eskom cannot, like a private company, just stop supply to a client who doesn't pay. They have to jump through a couple of what is called cooperative governance loops. These things have been developed by the courts over time, by various court judgments, and you've got to adhere to those requirements before you can take action. Eskom now has got their legal ducks in a row, and they can do it, and they've now started terminating services, threatening to do it to the largest city in the country, Johannesburg. So that's also a form of cash flow squeeze in a different way by withholding the service, which will put pressure on defaulting municipalities. The third point of pressure comes from the Department of COGTA. COGTA simply stands for Cooperative Governance, Cooperative Government and Traditional Affairs. Long name, but essentially they're the government department responsible for the policy on local governments. They can't execute, but they're responsible for policy. And COGTA has released a new white paper, draft white paper, in which they suggest very radical changes to our current system of local government. Basically, they jettison the current approach of one size fits all, where you treat all municipalities more or less the same. They propose to eliminate district municipalities, which is a big change. And thirdly, they make the very important, they accept the very important point that a municipality must be aligned between the mandates you give them and the capacity and resources to execute that mandate. We haven't got that in the current system, and that's an important change. COGTA is also busy with legislation on how coalition governments should operate inside a local government, but I will come to that. So this redesigning of the system means that the governments that we will elect in November will, over the next 5 years, find themselves in a very different structure and a very different environment from the one in which they are now. And then the fourth department that is putting pressure on local government is the Department of Water and Sanitation. And they're driving a process of structural reform. Let's just look at what is entailed in that structural reform. Look, the biggest change in philosophy that we've had in the last 20 years or so is the fact that we started accepting that state monopolies cannot do the job on their own. They have to make room for what I call co-delivery by the private sector. And the private sector can be the for-profit private sector, or it can be the not-for-profit private sector. It can include NGOs, it can include community-based organizations and not-for-profit entities. But the fact is they're not state monopolies. We've seen a dramatic development of that in electricity generation. For many, many years, Eskom was the sole supplier of electricity to the country, effectively. That has now terminated. And as the President has said in his SONA speech in the beginning of this year, we never again want to be in a position where one monopoly supplier provides a critical service like that. The same thing is beginning to happen in railways, and the same thing is happening in ports. What Water and Sanitation is doing now is to implement this philosophy, this approach, in the way that local governments operate, specifically in respect of water and sanitation. And how do they do that? Through the Water Services Act, which is right now, as we're talking, busy going through Parliament. And what they do is to separate oversight and delivery functions. A WSA is a Water Service Authority. They have certain constitutional duties. They must make sure that all citizens in the area get water. They must set the prices, and they've got an oversight role in respect of water. A water services provider is not responsible for those. They're responsible for actually doing the job, making sure water flow through the pipes, making sure the customers get billed, collecting the money from those bills, and doing the maintenance. It's two very different functions. In South Africa, over the last 30 years, things have developed in a way where municipalities are automatically both water service authorities as well as water service providers. And what the Water Services Act will do is to split those two. A water service provider must get a license, they must meet certain minimum requirements, and if they don't meet the minimum requirements, they will lose the license, and the license can then be given to somebody else. And that somebody else will in all likelihood not be another municipality, or it could be, but it can be one of the private sector operators I've referred to. And just to give you a feel, at the moment of the 257 municipalities in the country, there are only two where the municipality is not the service provider, but a private sector company is. The one is Bombela in Mpumalanga, and the other one is Belito on the Dolphin Coast. And it's quite interesting to look at those two areas and see how much better they perform than many other municipalities where the local government is actually the water service provider. The second big change that the Water Services Act will bring is that water, electricity, and waste removal will be ring-fenced, meaning the income from selling those services will go back into the services. At the moment, the income is spread across whatever expenses the municipality has. There's no ring-fencing. There's no focused application of the money. Ring-fencing will change that and will ensure that money is first used to do the maintenance, to employ the right people, and to do CapEx, because infrastructure needs consistent renewal. So those are the changes that the Department of Water and Sanitation is bringing. And effectively, if you can summarize it all in one point, it is that a hybrid services model will start replacing the model of monopolies that we are traditionally used to. In other words, what we see in Bombela and what we see in on the Dolphin Coast in Belito, that can become much more applicable over the rest of the country. Hybrid services model will replace monopolies. Then, in conjunction with National Treasury, Water and Sanitation is also busy with a Metro Trading Services Reform Program. There is 54 billion rand available over a 6-year period. And the idea is that the 8 metros in the country, for every rand that they mobilize from their own funds, Treasury will give them another 1 rand to replace infrastructure and to do upgrades and modernize their systems. It is dependent, participating in this program is dependent on the ring fencing, concluding that in a proper way, and structuring the trading services of the metro on a commercial basis. Once that is done, you can apply to have some of that 54 billion coming your way, and you have got to meet it 1 rand for 1 rand. This can make a big change in infrastructure development over the next couple of years. Also, to help this process of developing a hybrid delivery model, the department has put up the Water Partnership Office in the Development Bank of Southern Africa. And what the Water Partnership Office is there for, its primary function is to help municipalities to bring private sector money, which again can be for-profit money from banks and so on, but also grant funding from non-profit organizations, bring money from those sources as well as skills into municipal operations in South Africa. And if you look at what they're doing, you can see there's quite an interesting array of projects. And the way they do it is they want to develop standardized contracts, standardized programs for how a municipality can tackle different problem areas. In that way, municipalities don't each have to reinvent the wheel. And in that way, you can have a quality control coming from professional standardized contracts on how you do things. And here is a list of the projects which they're currently involved in. You can see that they raised 4.23 billion rand from the Green Climate Fund, which is based in South Korea. And that money is used to develop water reuse projects. South Africa is a dry country, although we don't always treat water as if it's a dry country, and we have to reuse some of the resources. Our neighboring neighbor Namibia in Windhoek has been using reused waters now for many, many decades, and nobody falls ill. It is a very doable thing once you know how to do it and once you've got the money. The Water Partnership Office is also working at the moment with 9 municipalities on non-revenue water. South Africa has got a very high percentage of non-revenue water, 47% in many cases. That's a huge amount of money where water is delivered, but no funds come back into the municipality or into the water system. And once again, there are standard ways of how you can handle these problems, and that's what the office is busy with. They also raised money from the Gates Foundation for non-sewage sanitation. The reality is that you cannot connect everybody to a sanitation grid. We're very far away from that point. But in the meantime, you've got to find solutions until such a time as everybody is connected. And there's some interesting work going on around the world, not just in South Africa. There are a number of pilot projects in KwaZulu-Natal, and we're learning a lot from other countries in Latin America and in Africa and in Asia on how to tackle that. And the Gates Foundation is helping with that effort. Then we all know that we've got a sanitation problem in the country. Raw sewage is not properly treated and reworked and put back into the system, causing all kinds of pollution and health problems. And the Water Partnership Office is working at the moment with municipalities on how to deal with that problem. And in one case, it is also working with a municipality on creating water from desalination. Now, this gives you a feel for what the Water Partnership Office is doing. And the essential point is, in line with what I said at the beginning, using the services of the WPO is voluntary. You can't force a municipality to make use of it. But it is there, it's available. And the more successful the projects are, I'm sure more and more municipalities will start knocking on the door or wanting to make use of it, particularly if there's also revenue or money, capital available. So the Water Partnership Office is a deliberate attempt by the Water and Sanitation Department to develop the hybrid model in the country. That deals with the management side of things. Let's look at the pure politics, and that's coalitions. And you know more or less the story. We've got 66 municipalities at the moment in South Africa, which are governed by a coalition. And that number will probably increase in the November elections, simply because as the ANC and other big parties lose some of their support, that move in support is not going to go to another big party. It is likely to go to smaller parties, and that will give the smaller parties a bigger say in various municipalities and metros. And Johannesburg illustrates the problem very well. The DA is doing very well at the moment in Joburg. In the last local government election in 2021, they got 26% of the vote. At the moment, polls say they're standing at 39, 40%. Now, that's a big move. From 26 to 40 is a huge move, and the party can feel very happy about that. But it's not 50%. So if you want to rule the metro of Joburg, you need 50 plus 1. You need to find coalition partners that you can work with so that you can run the city in coalition with others. And for that, you need agreement between parties. You need people to come together. And coalitions is still a new thing in South Africa. And certainly in the local government sphere, the first 5 years after 2021 has not been a happy period. Coalitions have caused lots of instability in local governments. So we have to learn how to live and work with that. And that's where the Municipal Structures Amendment Bill comes in. It is now on its way to Parliament, and hopefully it will be passed, if not this year, then at least early next year. And what the bill tries to do is to move from informal political agreements, which is what we've seen the last 5 years, to a rules-based coalition governance order. So parties can make their agreements, no problem, but they have to subject themselves to certain common rules. That's really what the amendment bill is about. Now, it makes a number of changes. For example, it lengthens the time frame that a municipality has after the election to constitute itself. That used to be 14 days, and that clearly showed as that was insufficient time. That's now being lengthened to 30 days. So to give time for parties to find one another and form that coalition government. If one party wins all the time with 50% of the vote, well, then 14 days are okay. But when parties have to negotiate coalitions, you need a bit more time. A second innovation is that when parties form a coalition, they have to have a written agreement as to what they're going to do, what their priorities will be, and how they're going to approach the job. And that written agreement must last for 5 years, the terms of the term of the council. There is a limit that is being imposed on no confidence motions. Again, in the last 5 years, we've seen the no confidence mechanism used many, many times to get rid of people that you don't like, or to get rid of parties whose representatives you didn't like. And it caused a huge amount of instability. Johannesburg had a number of mayors in basically the 5 years that it has been run by a coalition. And you want to control the use of that. There are also details on how speakers should handle meetings, council meetings, once they are in process or in a meeting. Again, there has been some shenanigans that played out. And lastly, the amendment bill will empower provincial MECs to intervene in cases where they can see that things are not going well. So what we're seeing here is we will likely have more coalitions as a result of more fragmentation, and to try and manage that, there's an amendment bill now to force people not just to live by political agreement, but also to live by clear rules-based governance. If we come to the old question of, so what, where does all this leave us? Then this point I've already made several times. In local governments, we deal with the 2 Ps. There is politics and there's performance. and we've got to get both right. The coalition behavior, the politics, that can be regulated, and there's a bill to that effect. Performance can be improved by developing hybrid models and also applying sticks and carrots. In other words, punishment, but also incentives. And we've discussed that in detail. So, bottom line, the councils that will be elected in November will operate under very different conditions over the next 5 years than what they have operated in the last 5 years. And that makes your vote in November all the more important. Thank you.
Great, JP. Thank you so much. We're at the end of our session. I really appreciate your extremely interesting insights. And until next time, we'll probably catch up with you after the elections and then get your insights and commentary. So really appreciate your attendance today. Thank you very much.